All right, welcome back to another edition of the Forts Athletics Life and Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Inferna. We're at Forts Athletics. We equip coaches and athletes with the tools they seek out in order to achieve their unique and specific goals. And we are recording this episode, Chronicles podcast, on Tuesday, February 8th. It's kind of early in the morning here. We're on our way to school. And I haven't, like I said, I guess this is the first one since over the summer, and a lot has happened since the summer, but we'll start with what's going on the last couple weeks. And I just wrote a couple blog posts about this, and I think it's really interesting to share. At least I think it's interesting to share so I spent some time working with a couple of high school kids at one of the schools that I work at, that I share some time with out here. And for the most part, the kids had never thrown the weight with like weight turns, right? Kind of like a modified Highland Games type of competition technique. So the coach asked me, like over the summer, if I would be interested after I gave a presentation to the staff. And sure enough, last week was the first day that I spent some time with the kids. And it's really interesting. So I was talking to Lewis and like some other coaches about this, that for the most part, working with high school athletes and working with college athletes, really a lot of similarities, not real differences, not many differences anyway. Some body awareness stuff, maturity, which we'll talk about, but then again, maturity kind of dissipates sometimes with college athletes too, so I guess it depends on your situation or what have you. But anyway, so we spent a couple days practicing, and we did some learn to turn, and we did a few drills, some release drills. Now the interesting thing, high school throwing for boys, the weight's 25 pounds and a shot's 12 pounds. So if you're moderately strong high school student, boy, who has some decent body awareness and is able to follow direction well, and this is just my opinion, you're able to pick up weight turns pretty well and be able to compete with at least one wind and 2 turns, or 1 wind and 3 turns. And that's the goal for me with the college athletes. The first session is 2 winds and 3 turns with a hammer. So we don't have that luxury in our school. We actually throw in the cafeteria on top of the auditorium, if you can picture that. So we're like, school plays take place and things of that nature. That's where we are. And it's really interesting because it's really narrow, and it reminds me of NAS, kind of like when we were throwing in our racquetball court. So anyway, so the kids, there's marks on both walls, so the kids basically spray stuff all over the place, which is cool. So when we did some learn to turn and we took some throws, on the first day, kids were able to really pick it up pretty well. There was a lot of frustration, which is really interesting, because for the kids who have never thrown with an actual turn, they seem to be most frustrated, and I wasn't really sure why after the first day, because I didn't really spend, it was only an hour that we had, so learn to turn and then a few throws, so I didn't really want to dig in too much with what other stuff's happening besides house school and things of that nature. They're all 11th graders, so it's a pretty difficult time right now, I can imagine. I remember teaching that age group, so I understand. And then we did another session the following day, where we picked up where we left off for the most part, did some more turns, more throwing, right? A little bit more volume, and really just picked 2 things to really emphasize for that session. And then the following meet that happened on Saturday. So because of protocols, COVID protocols, and rankings, so one of the throwers was able to compete this weekend, and a totally different environment from my perspective. There really wasn't a lot of well, let me start here. Meet was run exceptionally well. The officials, there were 16 throwers, one flight, everybody got 4 throws. Between shot and disc, or shot and weight rather, both boys and girls, we were done in an hour and a half. It was over. So some meets you go in college and it takes an hour to get through a flight or two, depending on how many athletes there are, or 2 hours to finish a gender of something. So we were done with the whole competition in an hour and a half. So it doesn't lend itself to a lot of time and really being able to make adjustments and things. But shot put went really well, personal best. This athlete, he came in seated 12th out of 16, PR'd by 1.5 feet and finished 5th. So those were points that I guess were a bonus for the team for this conference championship. Then we went to the weight, and the excitement quickly kind of wore off once we got going. It was just really interesting watching the dynamic, the switch, how athletes interact with each other, the conversation in between throws. But this particular thrower, he was seated second. There were only 2 kids over 40 feet, so it really wasn't a concern about, is he going to make the finals or, finish second. One other thrower threw just over 40 feet to finish 3rd. Our athlete threw 41 feet in the 3rd round. Warm-ups went really well. Nice, easy, 1 wind, 2 turn throw. Just trying to, get the feel for the circle, even though we have competed there a million times, or they have. So his first throw was a sector foul, barely. I don't know, I would have gave it to him, but that's me. I would probably not be a good official because I would give the benefit of the doubt to the throwers. So barely hit the sector. And then second throw, the other sector, so hung on a little too long. So 3rd throw was a mark, 41 feet and change. And as the thrower's coming back to me, he's like, yeah, I reverted back to my old technique because I wanted to get a mark. And then 4th round was a foul also. So didn't PR, finished second, which is what the expectation was, I guess, because that's where he was seated. And then we were talking after, and I said, what happened there in round 3? And he said, I got scared. I wanted to make sure I got a fair throw, so I reverted back to old technique, which I guess in that situation would be fine. I've spent a total of an hour and a half with this group of athletes, so there's not a lot of background yet. And I just thought it was interesting that not so much the fear, but the reverting back to prior technique in order to ensure an outcome that might not really have mattered either way, if that makes sense. Really haven't talked about goals or anything like that. This was just, hey, can you come watch practice and maybe come to a meet and see what happens? The coaches were pleased with the performance, but it just kind of leaves me thinking how much more can be done at the high school level to work with and prepare high school throwers. See, there were 7 schools represented out of the 16 athletes. Two schools had throwing coaches, myself and another. And it was just really interesting, the dynamic of how athletes interact with each other, where there really isn't time to decompress or think about what's happening. But it's really interesting. We'll continue this another episode here. I guess this was part 1 of high school meets. We'll continue with part 2 in the next episode. This is Charles Inferno. Thank you very much for listening to Force Athletics Life and Coaching Podcast. Have a great day.